Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to wrap up the historical fiction readathon. So the historical fiction readathon was hosted by myself and Tori from Novel Life. We decided to do a historical fiction readathon for September 16th through the 22nd, and we had so much fun doing this. We actually have a mostly historical fiction book club, which is Leave It to the Pros, where we read a historical fiction book every month and then do a live show and talk about it and share our thoughts and all of those things. So for September though, like I said, it was a mostly historical fiction book club because for September we decided to do a cozy fantasy that we both purchased at the Steamy Lit book signing earlier this summer together. And so we were like, for fall, this one just seems like super cute. It was on both of our TBRs, so we got to that. So instead for September, since we kind of mixed it up for the book club, we decided let's do a historical fiction readathon because like, wait a minute, there are so many historical fictions on our TBRs that we both wanted to get to. And it was just so much fun and the best week reading historical fictions, honestly. So I originally planned to vlog the historical fiction readathon, but like, let's be honest, I'm just not in my vlogging era. And so I didn't make that a priority. So I didn't vlog. I think I do have a little bit of footage, which I will share. I have some footage where I actually did go to a used bookstore the weekend right before the readathon started because I wanted to see what I could find there in their historical fiction and like pick up some books, which I did find our group reader there. So that was great. So I do have some footage of that. And then I think I have some footage of the reading sprints, possibly one of the days. So I have some things, but like I didn't sit down and talk about my books or like share anything else. So yeah, worst vlogger ever. It's fine. But I did still want to share all of my thoughts on the reads that I did read for it. So I decided to do this kind of like wrap up video instead. So hopefully you enjoy. Really quickly, I'm going to pull up my TBR. I will share it here. So I had 9 books that I put on my TBR for the readathon. It was for a week. I was like, I'm feeling ambitious. I want to get to so many of these. So many of them had been on my TBR for years. Some of them were new books that were recently on my radar. A lot of these were new to me authors. And so I just wanted to get to all the books. And thankfully, the week totally worked out for me where I was able to get through 7 of these. So I'm going to talk about all of them separately. So it totally worked out that the week that the readathon was a kind of more chill work week for me where I had to do do mostly like lists and kind of making graphics and things like that for the authors that I work for. So instead I was able to focus on audiobooks while I kind of did these tasks. So that worked out perfectly, because if the readathon had been the previous week, it would have been wild. And I don't know how many books I would have gotten through at all, because I was very busy where I wasn't able to do much reading or much audio or anything. And so yeah, this week was just like the perfect week. It worked out perfectly. I had all audios for all of these from the library or from KU Read and Listen, which I will talk about those in a minute as well. And so yeah, it just worked out like so perfectly. Got through so many, added so many more to my TBR as well. The reading sprints in particular, we had 2 reading sprints, one time on Tori's channel and the next time on my channel. And then we had a wrap up kind of style video at the very end of the readathon just to share all of our favorites and also talk about the group pick. So that was fun as well, because during all of those live shows, we got so many more recs. So I was like nonstop adding all of those recs to my TBR list. I was pulling books from Libby, from library sources, getting the audio, putting the holds in, doing all those things. So I'm very excited because now my historical fiction TBR is stacked. And I'm excited for another round of historical fiction readathon, maybe sometime in the future. All right, so I'm just gonna review the books really quickly for you and tell you what I gave them, all of those things, and we're just gonna run down them in order of when I read them. So the first book I started with is The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This one had been my TBR for a while. I saw it a lot. I think it came out last year, and I saw it making a ton of like people's favorites lists. It was in like news articles, kind of like all of those things. It was getting a lot of awards, getting a lot of hype, buzz. It was a national bestseller, so just kind of like all of those lists, and it was all over the bookstores because the cover actually really grabbed my attention because I love like a bold, vibrant cover, and the blueberries on here just like grabbed my attention. So yeah, The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. And this one I ended up giving 3.5/4 stars to. This one I believe, yes, it's the author's debut, and there were parts in here that were really good and would really hit, and then other times it just kind of felt like it was dragging a bit, or just kind of like the writing wasn't perfectly polished, if that makes sense. But then in the end, it kind of brought it back all together again, and it actually did get me teary-eyed as well. So there was that emotional element. So like I said, that's why I rounded up to 4, because I was like, okay, it did pull something from me, so we got to round it up to 4. All right, so this story, it is told in dual timeline. We're following 2 different characters, and so we start off in the 1960s, and this indigenous family, they come down from Nova Scotia to Maine, and they do berry picking like every season, and so that's just their job or what they do. And so the year when it starts off, when they're doing that in the 60s, their youngest daughter ends up going missing, and one of her brothers is the last person to have seen her out in the berry picking field, which I think she's like 4 or 6 at the time. I think she's pretty young, maybe 4. But anyway, so it haunts him for the rest of his life, and so we follow him, which is Joe, and so we follow his POV through the years, and we see like how this has affected his life going forward, which yeah, the mystery of where his little sister Ruthie went has gone unsolved. No one's figured it out for like 50 years. And so it's just like remained a mystery, and just has led to like a lot of trauma and tragedy to their families' lives and to kind of the characters that it affected. So we follow that going forward with Joe's POV, and like we cut to present day as well as back to the 60s, and kind of all leading up to those years throughout. And so in the other chapters, we follow Norma, and so we see her from like the 60s, 70s, all the way up until like the present day time as well, where she is like the only daughter of this affluent kind of family that's very wealthy. Her father's kind of like emotionally distanced and not really there. And then her mother is toxic in the way that she's just like obsessively protective, overly protective, but like in a toxic way, and she's not the nicest person. So, and we see Norma kind of dealing with that growing up, and over the years, she starts to realize something's not quite right. Like, she doesn't look like her parents. They don't have any like old photos from like when she was younger. Like, none of their stories are adding up. They'll tell her about a relative, and then like somebody else is like, who are you talking about? Like, that person doesn't exist. And so there's a lot of like kind of moments in here, which I mean, I think you can figure out where the story's going. Like, that's not part of like a surprise or a twist or a mystery. You kind of know that going throughout, and you just kind of see her struggling with trying to come to terms with that, either not wanting to admit it, not wanting to look more into it. She doesn't like dig into it. And so it's not until much later in her life when her parents pass and she's kind of going through their stuff that she starts to kind of piece some things together, or finally dig into what was actually going on when she was younger. And so yeah, we just kind of follow her throughout her life. We see when she's younger, she had these recurring dreams or visions of memories or moments, which her family would just tell her, those aren't memories, those are dreams. Like, you're just in a dream world. None of this is real. And so we see that like layering up over her life over the years. We see kind of her troubles and turmoils and relationships and marriages, and kind of her life fall apart a bit too. So yeah, a lot of tragedy for honestly both of these characters that we follow. But in the end, like, it's not all super sad, but it's just like their lives through the years. So yeah, I will say this one is pretty heavy though, with just kind of all the tragedy and traumas of both Norma and Joe's lives that we see over the years. Like I said, there is some moments at the end that did get me teary-eyed. So after going through this journey with him, which it feels a lot longer, like the book is just about 300 pages, maybe like 310, pretty much on the short side. So I did enjoy it for what it was. I just wanted a little bit more, but like it was good. And for a debut, I'm excited to check out more from the author like going forward. So yeah, 3.5/4 stars for this one for me. All right, and then I jumped into Next Year in Havana by Chanel Clayton. I always get these titles wrong for the series because it is a whole series, and I decided to jump into the first book. So this book, this author, this series has been on my TBR for literally years. I had copies of this physical book at one point in my house. It might be around here somewhere. Haven't been able to find it. I might have gotten rid of it over the times, I don't know. But anyways, I finally got to it. I'm so glad I did, because this one I gave 4.5 stars to. All right, so this one is set in Cuba, and in this one we have a dual timeline as well. So we're in the 1950s. I want to say 1958. Yes, 1958. And then in 2017, which I think is around the time the book was published. So like present day for the time that the book was published. So we follow those two different timelines. And at the beginning of the story, we're following Marisol in Miami, and her beloved grandmother recently passed away. And she grew up, like I said, in Miami, and she always heard all these like wonderful, amazing stories from her grandmother, who I think raised her, because I think her parents got divorced. Her mom went back to Spain. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure her grandmother stepped in and raised her. And so she had a really close relationship with her. She grew up always hearing these fabulous, amazing stories of her grandmother's life in Cuba, in Havana, before things happened and she had to move to Miami. And so now Marisol wants to go to Cuba to see all these like amazing places her grandmother always talked about. I believe she's also taking her remains there to like scatter ashes, I believe. And then Marisol as well, she's a writer. I believe she does like kind of travel, food, fashion, all those things. And so now that Cuba is opened back up, she is using this as like a work opportunity as well, and going over there to write a story. And so when she gets there, she ends up meeting her late grandmother's best friend's grandson. He's the one who picks her up at the airport, and they kind of have a little moment and things unfold there. And so we see Marisol in present day in Cuba with that happening. And so like I said, we jump back to the 1950s. So it's 1958 Havana. Her grandmother is a 19-year-old, and things are shaking up with the government, with the country, where basically her grandmother grew up in high society. Her father was a sugar baron. And so she's always been kind of sheltered from the political unrest that's happening, but now things are kind of ramping up and their lives are getting shaken up, and she ends up meeting this like rebellious guy as well. Some things happen, and we see just kind of like both of these stories unfold while we follow this like dual timeline, jumping back like from chapter to chapter. This one was just so good. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved it. I honestly wanted to like throw my TBR out the window and continue on with this entire series to binge, but I was good and I didn't do that. But I do plan to go and finish the rest of the series because it was just so good. The writing is really fast paced and really just like pulls you in to both of these characters' stories. We do get like some romances for both of them and some love stories, and we get some family secrets and just a lot of things like unfolding. This setting was really interesting as well, because I don't think I've read this setting in Cuba before. So this was like the new to me time period that I used for our like prompts. So yeah, I just love this one. I love the characters. I love the history. I love the culture. I love the setting that we got with all of these stories unfolding. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. 4.5 stars. One of my favorite from the Readathon. All right, next up, I jumped into The Rose Arbor by Reese Bowen. So this is a new to me author. This author I had seen a lot. I think most of their books, if not all, are on Kindle Unlimited. So that kind of had my interest piqued because I was like, ooh, historical fiction on Kindle Unlimited. Let me give it a try. So I did. And this one I sadly ended up giving 3 stars to. So this one is a new release. I think it just came out this summer. The cover honestly grabbed my attention, as well as I just keep my eyes out for like newer historical fiction releases. And so that was on the list. And so I decided to read it. This one is a historical fiction mystery. This one is another dual timeline situation. But in this one, the current day is London, 1968. And then we're following some situations that lead back to cases back from World War II, like during 1943-ish, I want to say. So in this one, we follow the heroine, and like I said, it's London, 1968, and she is an obituary writer for a London newspaper, and she's kind of just like tapped out with her career, and she's just kind of bored of her kind of newspaper job, so she really wants to make her way into the newsroom. And so there's this local like missing girl case that has kind of taken hold of the city, like everybody's interested in it, and so she decides, you know what, I should get involved in this, try to break the case, and then that can maybe be my way to weasel myself into the newsroom. So she ends up trying to do that. that. And so it kind of works out because her best friend is a detective kind of working on the case. And so she kind of just like, you know, pals up with her and is like, hey, take me with you. Like, you're going to the countryside. I want to go with you. Let's like solve this thing. So it kind of goes from there. And then when they get to the city where it happened, it's like small countryside, that they then realize that this girl's missing, but also it's kind of leading back to many girls have gone missing in the city throughout the years, and it dates back to like I said, like World War II and 1940s, 1943-ish, I want to say, when some other girls have also gone missing as well. And so these cases kind of connect. So this one, like I said, it was just kind of a bit of a slog to get through, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. There were some interesting moments in here. I really thought it was interesting learning about that during the Blitz, when things were happening in World War II and London and the city was getting bombed, that they actually sent, like families, I should say, sent their children, their daughters away on the train to get out of the city, which I don't think I ever knew, or if I did, it's not really like discussed as much as it was in this book. So like a lot of people didn't know where their children went. They just wanted to get them into safety and sent them out of the city. And so things happened. Children went missing, kind of all of these things. And that's kind of like where the story takes place in the past years. So that part was interesting. And so the heroine as well, while she is in this kind of like countryside town, she starts to feel very pulled to the town. She starts kind of having these memories show up, and she can't figure out if she's like how she's having these memories. So that's kind of unfolding with her own little mystery moment as well. So yeah, the beginning, super interesting. The middle started to drag, and then the end kind of dragged a bit for me as well. I just wanted a bit more with this one. So yeah, 3 stars. All right, so then I jumped into Homegoing by Ya Jessie. I believe that's how the author's name was pronounced on the audiobook as well. So hopefully that's correct. But this one I absolutely loved. I gave it 5 stars. So this is one of those books that had been on my TBR for literally years since it came out. I know so many friends who love it and that say it just hits so well, that the writing is so amazing. And so I wanted to give it a fair go, because other times when I'd grab it from the library, I just wasn't in the mood for that kind of like heaviness of a story at the time. So I'd send the audio back, grab it out again, and kind of all those things back and forth. And so I'm so glad I finally got to it, because it was so amazing, so good. Like everything everybody says about this book is true. It hits so hard. It was so beautiful. It's the author's debut, which I think is wild because the writing was amazing, and I'm very excited now to read their next book, which is The Transcendent Kingdom, I want to say. That one I don't think is historical fiction, but I definitely want to have this author on my radar for other books in the future. This book is so good. Like, we don't really follow one story, but like we kind of do, because the themes of all of the stories that pile up, it's kind of like a collection of short stories. Like, it's really hard to describe it, but basically this book spans 300 years with one family. And so we have multiple POVs, but each chapter we only get one person's POV. Like, once we're done with that chapter with that person, we don't see their chapters or POVs again. Like, one POV per person, and it goes on through the descendants of this family. And so we start off in Ghana following these 2 half-sisters, and one of them is kind of captured and sold into slavery and moved to the US. And the other sister is married off to this wealthy Englishman and kind of raised in this palace. I think that's what they call it. No, castle. Cape Coast Castle. And so it kind of goes from there. And like I said, the first 2 chapters, we follow each of these sisters' POVs, and it starts in the 1700s in Ghana. And then the next chapter is the descendants of each of the sisters. And so we kind of bounce like that, and we just keep going down the line 300 years later to present day, and we're now in Harlem, and we're following just their descendants over time throughout history. And so we see a lot through here. We see obviously slavery discussed, we see colonization, we see the warfare in Ghana, racism, the political aspect of it all for everybody. There are plantations, there's the Civil War, we go through the Great Migration, and then eventually we get to like jazz clubs, we get to Harlem, we get to all of these things, and we follow all of these character stories. And like sometimes they're female descendants, sometimes it's their male descendants, and so it kind of just switches it up depending on which character you're following. And a lot of them are going through a lot of things because of the time frame that a lot of these are handling. There's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of heaviness, there's a lot of like content warning, which I think that's kind of self-explanatory with a lot of these historical fiction books, but it's very heavy. But there's also like this moment of hope through all of them, and you know, deep down you know they're gonna make it through whatever they're going through, because you know there's a next chapter, and the next chapter is their descendants chapter. So obviously they make it through whatever they're going through at the time to at least have a descendant to then tell their story. And it was really beautiful how all of these stories woven together just really equal out and showcase how they could be at different situations, different time periods, different places, but they're all going through something similar, or there's like similar threads woven throughout this entire like tapestry of their family history. And it was just such an interesting read. Like, I could talk about this read forever. I really, really enjoyed it. It was kind of like doing like a family ancestry type history, genealogy, seeing like the family tree, but in literary form, which I thought was just so good. Just such a powerful story. Highly recommend. Like I said, I can't say enough good things about this book. Highly recommend people picking it up because it's so good. The audiobook especially was really well done. Highly recommend. Love this one. Is my favorite of the readathon. All right, and then I decided to jump into the group read that we had. So we had a lot of like prompts for the readathon, as well as we had a group read, which that was one of the prompts as well. And that was like our live show. We talked about this book in particular, as well as, like I said, all of our favorites and stuff like that. But this is The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. So Tori and I both read Kate Quinn for the first time back in, I think, was it July? No, August was our book club pick for her newest release, which is The Briar Club, which we really enjoyed and wanted to get back into some of her older books. And so The Rose Code was always mentioned as one that people love by this author. So we decided to do this one as our group read. This was a very long one. I think it's over 600 pages for this version that I have, at least. And so it was very dense. This one I ended up giving 3.5, but I rounded up to 4 stars because I do really enjoy Kate Quinn's writing. We had a really good discussion about this on our kind of wrap up live show. It was super interesting because Tori and I both gave this 3.5 stars. I think she rounded down, I rounded up because we liked different parts as well. Like, I really liked the beginning. I feel like that hooked me, and I really liked the ending, and especially the author's note at the end. It's kind of weighing my rating as well, but I just really enjoyed the beginning and the end, where the middle was kind of a slog for me, where Tori, and I know a lot of people in the chat as well, had said that the beginning was hard or they didn't enjoy it, and it was a lot, and they either set it down or didn't like that part. But then the middle was parts that they liked, and then the end kind of slowed down for them after some of the reveals, which, like, I was the opposite, but then we both came to the same rating, so that was super interesting. But in the live show, a lot of people said that they love this book by Kate Quinn, but for a lot of them, this was their first book from her, or they read this book and they haven't read her new book, which is The Briar Club. And so, like I said at the beginning, like, Tori and I started with The Briar Club. And so we were like, oh, I wonder if that's why, because we could see the growth of the author. And going back now to this book, which I think was published in, I don't remember when it was published. I don't even know if this version tells me. No, I don't know. When was this book published? I don't even know when this book was published, but it's been a while. It's a mystery. It's a mystery, like the mystery in here. No, not really. But it's been a while. But anyways, so we thought that was interesting because people would be like, oh, this is my favorite from her, but no, I haven't read The Briar Club yet. Or this was the first one I started with. So we were wondering if that had anything to do with it, like either not having read her newest one or also this being your first read from her. So it was just like a really interesting discussion. But anyways, back to this book. So as soon as this book started, which I don't read synopses usually for books, so I knew it was about World War II, and I knew it was code breakers, but like, I don't know, it was very vague of what I knew about this book, so I just wanted to read it. And so as soon as it started, we're in 1947, and then we also jump back to 1940 during the height of World War II, and we're following these 3 women who work at Bletchley Park, and we kind of see their stories. And so as soon as it started, I was like, oh, this is giving me like the Imitation Game vibes, the movie, and also like, you know, all of those things. And so I literally told my husband that, and I was like, this like whole setup is reminding me of that. Literally the next chapter started off talking about Alan Turing and the Enigma, all of that situation. And so I was like, oh, duh, of course, like, no wonder it was reminding me of that. So anyways, this follows these 3 women who worked at Bletchley Park, and they are the code breakers who are using the Enigma with the kind of translated codes that would come in all the time through Italian and German and kind of all of those things, and they would figure it out and pass it on to other people. And so anyways, we follow that happening where the 3 women worked there, and we follow in present day, the war's over, it's 1947, and these women end up getting a message, a coded message from their friend, and they kind of have to figure it out, and there's a mystery involved of what's going on, and it kind of goes back and forth through the different chapters. And then we also follow the different timelines, as well as the 3 different women and their lives and relationships and all of those complications throughout their, like, those years with them. So yeah, I do think this one was strong as far as Kate Quinn's writing is strong. The story, though, it kind of got a little bit muddled for me with all the different like POVs and all the different like jumping back in times, jumping back in the chapters through the times wasn't really my favorite situation. And the mystery element, I feel like the mystery and kind of what comes to be with that, the revelation of that was just kind of like, oh, it makes sense. Like, I think that's how we felt. Like, okay, sure, like I'm just reading the story. Like I'm not trying to guess what's happening. I'm not trying to do any of those things. Like I'm just reading it for what it is. So yeah, that was the book. And we also are following, like a lot of the chapters are counting down until the royal wedding, which wasn't really my favorite part of the story with that whole kind of like involvedness, but that's just a me thing with historical fictions. I don't really enjoy, especially like royals being involved. I don't know. It was a thing. But so yeah, overall it was good enough for me. So 3.5/4 stars. Like I said, I definitely do want to pick up more from Kate Quinn in the future. I know for sure the Alice Network and The Huntress are both on my TBR that are older books from her that were done as well. And so I definitely want to read more from her and kind of figure out which are my favorite. Because right now her newest book, The Briar Club, I really enjoyed. It was just like tight writing, and the plot, just like the characters, I just really enjoyed, where these characters I wasn't as pulled into. So maybe that was why as well. But anyways, yeah, that was our group read. And then for the historical romance prompt, I read Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta Chase. This was a reread for me because it was the September book club pick for one of my other book clubs, which is the Historical Hellions, which is a historical romance book club where we read historical romances published before the year 2000. This was a reread for me, and so that live show was coming up the same weekend that our readathon was ending, so I needed to get this reread in, and it worked perfectly for the historical romance prompt. This is one of my favorite historical romances. We already had our live show for this one as well, and I just love this book, so gave it 5 stars again. This one is a true enemies to lovers, hate to love setup. There is a compromise, kind of forced marriage of convenience situation. The heroine in here, though, like makes the book, the characters. This book is definitely character driven, and I personally love that because I love both of these characters. We have the baddest heroine of all time, Jessica Trent, and then we follow Dane, the hero. Sebastian is his name, and he's very much a broken boy, but not like in a sad way. He's just kind of like, he needs some character growth, and he's gone through some stuff. He has some trauma in his past, and he's emotionally damaged and messed up, and so she kind of helps him see the way through the story. I just love this one. It was one of my first historical romances that I read a few years ago that I just like really connected with and really loved. This reread, I wouldn't say I connected as much to it, but I still love it. So like my ratings stay the same of 5 stars, but it's just so strong and so good. And like I did the audio this time, which I don't know if that affected it because the first time I did the ebook or the physical. And so I don't know, it's just so good. I feel like it's a classic, iconic book of historical romance. Highly recommend. It's so, so good. Definitely my favorite from this author. And just like, I don't know, it's an icon, it's a moment, like Lord of Scoundrels. You have to read it if you haven't and you love historical romances. All right, and then the last book that I picked up was The Last Secret of Lily Adams by Sarah Blades. This one is a debut from this author as well. It just came out this summer, I want to say, yes. And this one was on my TBR because it was a Kindle Unlimited read and listen book. So basically, if you check out the book through Kindle Unlimited, you have the ebook on your library, then you end up getting the audiobook for free with it to listen to while you have it checked out through Kindle Unlimited. So I was like, yes, please, because of free audio, like why the heck not? And this one was really good. So I gave this one 4 stars. This is historical fiction with mystery, and it's told in a dual timeline. So we follow present day where the heroine, her beloved grandmother, actually a lot of these stories, like beloved grandmothers are passing away and we're following their granddaughters, but that's just a side notice. But anyways, so in here, the present day, the heroine, we're following her and she's going back to her beloved grandmother's house. Her grandmother recently passed away, and now she is tasked with going through her things. She was raised by her. She had a really close relationship with her, and her grandmother was a screen star slash Hollywood golden age, like 40s, 50s era, really popular actress. And so in her grandmother's will, she basically said that she doesn't want a funeral and she wants any of her possessions. Like she doesn't care where they go, but anything of value, she wants to be donated to like this golden age museum so they can have an exhibit about her career and her life. And so her granddaughter is at her grandmother's house to go through her things and figure out what things they want to donate to the museum for the exhibit and kind of all of that. And so the heroine is there with her teenage daughter. The heroine's recently divorced and she's kind of going through some things as well. And so with her daughter and with her relationship with her ex and just kind of her life in general. And so we follow them in present day and they're going through her grandmother's things, and they actually find, or her daughter finds, the grandmother's diary, and in there is a letter to the heroine. And the letter says something, let me see exactly. So it said something about like, my story begins and ends with Stella Lane, and like I've had these like thoughts and feelings and secrets on my like heart, on my life for a while, and I need to just get them out. So I need you to read the story. And so the heroine's like, oh my God, like what? I didn't even know my grandmother knew Stella Lane. And her daughter's like, who the heck is Stella Lane? So she's like, oh, she was actually another actress of the time during the Hollywood Golden Age. She was brutally murdered. Her case has never been solved. And also I never even knew my grandma knew her or was in the same circles as her. So like, how are their lives so entwined? And so it kind of goes from there, where we kick back into the past in the like 40s, where her grandmother is I think she's like a costume designer, or works in the costume / props department for like a big movie production company. And so she wants to be an actress. And so we kind of see her make her way up and kind of unfold from there. This one was just super fast paced. It kept me intrigued right from the start. I liked the characters and liked seeing where the story was going, and I just had a good time with it. I will say some of the aspects with the mystery element I saw coming, but like that didn't take away from the enjoyment for me at all. I just really enjoyed it. And especially since it came on like KU Read and Listen, like audio's always a win for me. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm excited to see what this author kind of comes out with next, because I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, 4 stars for that one. All right, so those are all 7 books that I read for the readathon. So for the prompts, I did do our group book, which was the Kate Quinn. I read a host book recommendation, which was the Chanel Clayton, because Tori has read the one that I read, as well as others in the series, and loved them and recommended them. I did a historical fiction set in the country that you live in, because multiples that I read do take place in the US. So for the one I just talked about, Hollywood Golden Age, that was all set in the US in California, and then as well as The Berry Pickers took place in Maine, and like other books as well. So definitely met that one. And then the next one is Read a Historical Mystery. So I read a couple historical mysteries. So I did the Rose Arbor, I had the Rose Code, the one that we read for the group book is also a mystery, and then the Last Secret of Lily Adams was also a mystery. So definitely met that prompt. Read a historical fiction set in a different country than you live in. Literally half of these took place in Europe, so definitely met that prompt. Read a historical romance, I did Lord of Scoundrels, so definitely met that. Read a historical fiction set in a new to you historical time period. So I think I said I was using the when we left what's it called? When we were in Cuba? No, that's not right. The Next Year in Havana. So that one is the one I'm using for that time period, of just kind of the place specifically with the time period is new to me. And so the only one I didn't get to was Read Historical Fantasy. So I kind of left that one until the very end, because I just wasn't feeling fantasy at the time. And so I did start the, what's it called? Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. I got like 45% through, and I just wasn't feeling it, and I felt like it wasn't going to get a good rating for me, and I just kind of wanted to not continue on. So I did like a soft DNF for that for now. Setting it aside, I think it was mostly just the mood I was in, because I love Alexis Hall's writing. So I want to get back to it and try it again. It's historical, sapphic, it has magic and fantasy and mythological characters and kind of like all of these things. So I want to get back to it and try it at another time. It just wasn't the time, so I set that one down. So I didn't meet that prompt, but like I'm okay with that because I had a lot of great reads. So yeah. All right, so that was my wrap up for the readathon. Like I said, I had so much fun and read so many new to me authors that I definitely want to go pick up the rest of their TBR now. I got so many new recs from this as well that I can't wait to dive into, and then maybe come back and tell you what I thought about all of those books. So very excited for all the things. Tori and I already said, like, we want to do another historical fiction readathon, but maybe like in a few more months. So yeah, we definitely want to do that because it was a lot of fun. So definitely let me know in the comments if you joined in on the readathon. If you have any historical fiction recs for me, I would love to know. Like I said, Tori and I do a historical fiction book club where we read a historical fiction every month. And so we're very excited. We actually have our book picked for October and I can't wait. So definitely follow us along as well. We post on our Instagram, as well as we have a Leave It to the Pros book club Instagram as well, where it just has the group picks for every month. So yeah, definitely follow along. Like I said, if you want to share any historical fiction recs with me, definitely let me know, because there are so many that I want to pick up, and so many new ones I keep hearing about that I want to pick up as well. So always adding to the TBR. So yeah, definitely do that. If you want to leave me an emoji in the comments instead today, let me know that you watched this video, and maybe leave me a rose. The rose code was our group pick, so that's all I can think of right now. So yeah, do a red rose emoji if you haven't done so yet. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.